Okay, so now that we've got both our enemies created, we're going to now set up waves, which is going to be our levels. It'll be our leveling system, and kind of how it works is that we're going to have each wave be a certain number of groups that arrive, and after those groups finish arriving, we want to have a break for the player. We want to tell the player they're on a new wave, and then start the new wave. And each wave, we're going to make it so that we can alter how many or how fast, really how often ships are groups of ships are arriving. So, but we're also going to set it up so that if we decide later on that we want to make later waves have more ships, we can do that. So we can kind of add to that by creating a way to do that and setting that up. So let's get going with that. We're in the control object. I'm going to go to the create event, and we're going to create a bunch of variables that we're going to need. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is create. We're going to use an assign variable to create a bunch of variables. These are variables that are just going to be used in the control object. So they're not going to be global variables. At the same time, they are going to be used in other events, so it's easier just to create regular variables rather than using temporary variables at that time. So we are going to create the first one called enemy wave. This will represent how many enemies will be considered one wave. And right now I'm going to set it to 10 to begin with. That'll be our initial amount that we'll call 10 groups a wave. So this is representing how many groups is considered a wave. Next, we will add a wave variable. This will represent which wave we are on. So we're going to set it to 1 because we always start on wave 1. Okay. Next one is called wait wave. Wait wave is going to be the base value for how much to wait in between groups. And I say the base value because remember we're randomizing the time between groups. So this is the value that will be used when calculating how many or how much to wait. We're making it a variable because then as waves increase, we can decrease that time so that the time gets shorter, which should make the game more difficult. And then finally, we're going to create a variable called new wave. And new wave is going to be a Boolean, so we're going to set it to true. And the new wave variable is going to be really just for displaying the wave number on the screen. So we're going to set new wave to true so that the program knows that when we're starting a new wave and what to do in terms of drawing for the new wave. And then we're going to set an alarm countdown that's going to be for new wave. So I'm going to add 1 to the set alarm countdown. We're going to change alarm 1 to 120. I'm also going to change alarm 0's value to 200. And this, because this is alarm 0, remember, is our alarm that goes off and sends the groups, right? That generates all the groups. So the initial alarm countdown is going to be set to 200, so that in between each wave there's a bunch of time that the player has to kind of adjust and get ready for the next wave. It also allows time for us to display the wave number so that the player knows what wave they're on, and then we can get started. So what that means is that we are going to display the wave. We're going to go to the draw event, and we're going to scroll up here, and we're going to go up to the main drawing area, which is up here, right? So as long as game over is false, we're drawing certain things on the screen. We only want to draw the new wave, or the wave number, as long as new wave is true. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're after the set font, the set draw color, and the set text alignment, because we want all of those things to be the same. We want to use the game font, we want to use white, and we want to have center middle as our text alignment. So right before the player's score, I'm going to add another draw value for this, and I'm going to do wave without a colon, and then leave a space, and then I'm going to have the value wave here. Okay, and we're going to display that in the very middle of the screen, which we can calculate by doing room width divided by 2 and room height divided by 2 as well. So room width, room height, both divided by 2 will put us literally right in the middle of the screen, and that'll always work. Now the only thing is we want to make sure that we only draw this when the new wave variable is true. So I'm going to scroll up and get an if variable, put that above the draw value, move the draw value inside so don't forget to do it. The variable is new wave, and then we're going to say equal to, and we want to say true. Then to turn off the new wave, we just need to flip the new wave variable to false. So I'm going to go back over here to my events. I'm going to add the alarm 1 event. And in the alarm 1 event, we're just going to flip the new wave value to false. Okay? We're not resetting it because we will set the alarm countdown when it comes time to show the next wave. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But the main thing that we want to do is to set to turn off the wave display after a short amount of time and before the next group comes. Okay. So now we're going to actually get into the waves themselves. Now this is where following along in class really helps, because I kind of explained how this works and how we're going to do it. What it looks like in code is going to look maybe a little weird because of what we're doing, but it works out, and it works, and that's the key. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the alarm 0 event where we create all of our enemies, and remember we've already used group count, so we have this variable in place so that we can check if the group count variable is a multiple of 10. And then if it is a multiple of 10 in this case, really if it's a multiple of our enemy wave value, whatever that is, then we will stop. We're going to stop sending more groups, which is a key here. So we already have this if. This if takes care of sending enemy 2s. The enemy 2 group shows up every 5. So on the second enemy 2 group is when we're going to send, or when we're going to finish the wave. So at the bottom here is where I'm going to be working for the most part. And I'm going to add an if expression. And this expression is going to be for checking if the current wave, the current group count, so global.group count, mod, and then we're going to use the enemy wave variable, because if it changes, we want to respond to that change. So we only want to change if we decide to up the total overall, or if we decide that in later, after a certain number of waves, we'll up the number of enemies in a wave. Then we can do that, and our program will respond to it. But it's going to be, we want mod equal, right? So global.group count mod enemy wave equal to 0. Remember, if you do a mod, use the mod function, and you get a 0, that means that the first number is a multiple of the second one, because the second one goes in evenly to the first one, because mod is short for modulo, and modulo is the remainder after dividing this one by that one. Okay? So if that's true, we are going to switch to our new wave. Now, what that really means is that we need to stop sending groups. We need to shorten the amount of time between waves. We need to display the next wave number. We need to increase the wave number. So there's several things that need to happen. So in order to not send another group, we're actually going to put this in an else. So we're going to add an assign variable inside of this if, and we're just going to change a couple of things. We're going to first of all add one to the wave. Okay, and then that one's going to be 1 and then relative. And then 2, we're going to take 5 steps off of the wait wave. So I'm going to do wait wave, -5, and then relative. And then I'm going to add my else. I can add it up here so that I make sure it goes beneath this assign variable. And then I'm going to move the random number, the get random number, and the alarm countdown, whoops, not there, into the else. So that if we're at the end of a wave, we don't send another group onto the screen. We're going to let the final group get off the screen, which means we're going to have to do some things, and we're going to make some adjustments as well. So this is all we're doing here. And you're like, what the heck? Oh, there's a reason for that. I want to only do some things when the final wave is done, when the final group is done. And the final group is done when either all of them have been destroyed or they're off the screen, which means we have 2 places where that's going to happen, which means we're going to set up a script to help us do that. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But we're going to go to the obj enemy 1, or I'm sorry, enemy 2, because they're always going to be the last group. And I did this specifically for this reason, that rather than having the possibility that it could be an enemy 1 or an enemy 2 group, I'm just going to leave it on. It's going to every ending group is going to be an enemy 2 group. What that means is that we only have to do things in the enemy 2 group that help us move to the next wave. And only if we know it's the end of a wave. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the step event, and we're going to work on, we need to check if we're off the screen. We already have a check for destroying, and we're going to deal with that in a moment. But we have not yet checked if we're off the screen, and we're going to do this for enemy 1 as well, because we should do this. This is a thing we should do, is that we should check and see if we're off the bottom of the screen. So because we can't simply say outside room because we start enemies outside the room, and if we use the outside room event, we would destroy enemies before they actually started on screen. So really we have to check and see, are they fully off the screen at the bottom, which means, is their bounding box top? Remember, that's a y variable or y coordinate representing the top of the bounding box. So I'm going to store this in a variable called top. We're going to make it a temporary variable though. And we're going to check and see, is that top value, top, greater than the room height? Because if it is, then the enemy must be fully off the screen. So we're going to make sure we destroy the instance. Now we're also going to do a bunch of other stuff, but that's where where our script is going to come in. Okay? Because the issue here we have is that there are 2 places where we need this code. And certainly we could create the code in one, copy and paste it into the other. That creates way more code than we really need, because this code is actually going to be quite long. So one way we can do that is creating what's called a script. A script in other programming languages would be called a procedure or a function. And what it is I'm going to write a bunch of code in this script. I called it scr check wave because I'm checking to see, are we at the end of the wave, and then doing some other things if we are. And it's going to be the same no matter what, whether it's the last enemy is destroyed or whether the last enemy is off the screen. Okay, so this will happen in, we'll call this script in our enemy2 object. But a script is then, I write all the code in it, and then I use the script, or I execute the script wherever I want to, and it allows me to use a bunch of code multiple times, and save me from too much extra coding. So here we go. Inside of this, we are going to add first a get instance variable to get. So we're going to get the current instance count. I'm sorry, not a get instance variable. I need get instance count. I'm going to scroll down. So the get instance count is right here. I'm going to get the instance count of enemy2 because I only want to do this if all the enemies are gone, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to check this after we destroy any enemies. So, and that way I know I've got how many enemies I've got, and then I'm going to check and see if that count. So if the enemy2 count is equal to 0, because we can't have less than 0 enemies on the screen, but we're only going to do things if the last enemy, if all the enemies are gone, all the enemy2s are gone. Right? And so we're going to check in here if, and then we're going to check a second if. So we're going to nest this if, and this is going to be an if expression. There's only some things we want to do if this is the end of a wave. So again, we're going to use that same thing we used earlier, global dot group count mod enemy wave equals 0. So again, our expression here is checking to see if we're at the end of a wave, which means it's the group count mod whatever the enemy wave value is equal to 0. Is the current group count a multiple of the enemy wave value? And if it is, then we want to add an apply to, because we're going to apply a bunch of stuff to the control object. So we're going to do a bunch of stuff in the control object. So I'm going to click on specifically the OBJ control object for the apply to, and then everything I'm going to do goes in there, because the variables we created are not global variables. We created local variables, so we're going to add an assign variable for new wave. And remember, new wave is just helping us show our wave on the screen. So I'm going to flip that to true. Okay, I'm going to set 2 alarm countdowns. So I'm going to add a set alarm countdown. We're going to click a plus. We're going to set alarm zeros to count down to 200. That's our standard space between waves. And then alarm 1, I'm going to set to 120, which is for the wave display. And that really should take care of everything. Now we just need to execute this script inside of the 2 parts of our OBJ enemy2. And really it's inside of the 1 event, but inside of 2 different if statements. So for both of these if statements, after the destroy instance, I'm going to execute a script. So we're going to scroll up here. I believe it's, let's see, this one here. I'm going to pull that into there. It's the SCR check wave. Okay, we don't need any arguments. We're not sending any values to the script. We're just executing it. We're going to do the same thing down here. Execute SCR check wave. And then there's one more thing that I want to do before we get too far, and that's for OBJ enemy 1. I want to, in the step event, do the same thing I did for the enemy 2, and that's destroy the enemy 2 or the enemy 1 if it's off screen. So we're going to do the same sorts of things. We're going to get, we need to get the instance variable. So I'm going to put that above this if variable here. In the top, bounding box top, it's going to be called top, and it's going to be a temporary variable. And then we're going to add an if statement underneath that for the top variable to see is the top greater than room height. And if it is, just simply destroy the instance. And because we're not doing anything with the group, or with waves with enemy 1, this should be good enough. And this will kind of manage, you'll be able to see that we won't have as many instances out there floating in space that aren't actually doing anything. So there's our wave 1 message, and then we're firing. And I'm going to just, main thing I'm going to do is make sure we get to wave 2. So there's 4 groups of enemy 1. Here's our group of enemy 2. And then the new groups of enemy 1 start appearing. Groups of enemy 2, I think that was 3. Oops, and let's check out, see what's going on with this. Global.group count. It says enemy wave wasn't set before. That's interesting. It's in the control object. Create event. Enemy wave is right there. I don't know what that's. What's going on with that? Let's go see what's going on with our script. I didn't anticipate that, but our apply to should work. Oh, I know what it is. We got to put the apply to above here. That's what it is. Now we can put this inside here. That was my fault. So we'll put these things inside of our if. Get them inside the if. I didn't quite. Oops. So now, let's check and see if that fixes it. I think that would, though. That should. So here we go. Here comes our first wave. 1, 2, 3, 4. First group of enemy 2s. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second group of enemy 2s. Now what we should see is that we should see either. I'll try to do a couple waves here so that we make sure. So now that all the enemies are gone, we start wave 2. I'm going to go ahead and get through wave 2 to see if, and I'll let the next group of enemies get off the screen. And then, so there's the first group of enemy 2. There's 2, 3. And here's our last group of enemy 2s, although I'm going to let them get off the screen to make sure that also works. And once I know that that works, and it does, perfect, we're good to go.